Hi everybody, this is Adam Dorrell and Camilla Scholten from CustomerGauge. Let's say hello.
Hello. Hi everybody, and welcome to this special live broadcasted webinar where we're going to talk a little bit about how you can earn the respect and engage your C-suite, which is the number one point that you need to get in place to run a good net promoter and retention program.
Brilliant. Hey, listen, why are we qualified to talk about this?
Are we?
Well, I think so.
Well, I think we do this a lot ourselves all the time. I do this a lot. I speak with a lot of CEOs. I have to present this to my own board on a monthly basis. And I think it's also because basically our board consists of our investors who've invested in the idea that it actually makes sense to run a retention program and that therefore our software is a good product. So we need to prove that we use it and how it works and what kind of benefits we derive from it.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And there's a certain thing that boards have. We'll talk about that, about how they like to see some things. But also, I mean, you're uniquely qualified because you talk to CEOs and senior people every day of the week on your QBRs.
Yes, we do. I actually just came out of a great QBR with DHL, one of our customers, and we get some really interesting requests, and also mainly around this topic, like how do you make sure that your CEO stays involved beyond the product launch?
Right. I mean, that's really crucial, isn't it?
Yeah.
So look, we're going to go through the agenda here. We're going to talk about how you get the board's attention. How you win respect, get commitment, and then we'll take some questions and answers if we can at the time. If you've got questions, everybody, suggest that you put them in the box, in the chat box or in the question box, and we've got Trishala here who's going to help us field those, I'm hoping. Right, here's my question to you, Trishala. I'm sorry, Camilla. let's say that you run the CX program or Net Promoter program, and you've got 15 minutes before the board. What are you going to say? I mean, what are the key things you're going to think about doing?
Well, I always really talk about how is our account base? Are they healthy? Is there any risk in there? Are we at risk of losing business? Have we grown the business? And also sort of like what are the standout examples of great feedback or where we've actually added some fantastic value? So it's a summary of sort of how we're doing with our crucial customers, sort of like how can we make sure that we're on top of them and that we understand, are we still having a healthy relationship with them?
I think that's brilliant. If you're not, I'm going to take a step back on this just to remind people on the call about why they do CX programs. It's quite important to frame that, I think. So here are some things that we put together, and Jörn helped me with this a lot, actually. So this is, a lot of people think that CX programs equal profitable growth, but they don't necessarily. And I think that's one of the things we really want to talk about, is that sometimes they just end up being research projects.
Yes.
But here are some really good stats we've got. If you focus on retention, you can increase profitability by a huge amount, according to Harvard. You increase your customer advocacy and profitability, and people spend more. I mean, we also know that from our research as well, that people spend 2 to 3 times more, and we try and grow our accounts by about 10% as a result of this.
Yeah.
So for us, it definitely works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And I also think it's good to have that as a focus, because I think if you start the relationship and if you don't have any way of getting back in there, and if your offer can't sort of like evolve with the customer, at some stage they might actually get more mature than you, and then sort of like there's a natural path. And I think it's just a really healthy outlook as a company to sort of extend that moment where that occurs and staying really on the ball and staying relevant.
I agree, but bearing in mind, so let's put ourselves in the position of a board or a C-suite. Now, we've been in front of these people before. It's as much as anything, it's keeping the attention on the business.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really good stuff. Again, we pulled some stats out from here from Bain, 2011. They did a survey on what top things execs care about, and customer experience is far down the list. And the things that they care about are revenue growth, profitability, and saving money.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, just they might say customer experience is really vital and loyalty is important. They might even be bonused on it, but
it's also the first thing that they will cut if things aren't going well. So I think it's really all about keeping them focused on the value that it brings. Right. And if you actually could prove that with numbers, it helps.
That's right.
And I think it's partly one of the downsides to coin phrasing it as customer experience is that it has a sort of softer feel to it. So if you could actually switch that to retention and also add the financial element to it, I think you get much more traction and interest.
I agree. I think that's the only way of engaging the board. So that's really what we're going to talk about here, is about how do you get the the board support, because it's really vital.
Yeah.
I mean, we know this. We know that the only way of getting your NPS program really working is to have the support of the top managers.
Yeah.
You know, this is crucial, isn't it? Because you need to involve many different parts of the business to get it working. And if you don't have that, it's
well, I think I think everybody recognizes that. I think it's also just more about sometimes you need to change things in order to drive progress. And if you don't have top line buy-in, so if your key stakeholders are not in the C-suite, it's much harder to do things, for the better. But yeah, so I think we've sort of like stated that it's crucial to have CEO or board buy-in.
Right. So again, this comes down to how do you get it to the top of the agenda? So this is my quick crib sheet about doing this based on my so many years experience in this. The first thing really is, you've got to link the program to money.
Yeah.
And we see that not enough people that we work with really have that as their top priority. No. And that's the number one thing.
Yeah, I think mostly because it depends a little bit where the program originates. So some of our customers, where it originates from a more financial or sales corner, it's much more intuitive and logic to do that. Whereas if we see this originating more in the service departments, it's harder because they have to work their way up the food chain in the companies, and they have to really get involvement from financial people because they originally sit more in a kind of like cost-cutting corner rather than in a revenue-generating corner. And I think that is sort of like a really, actually much tougher and bigger transformation that these people need to reach. And I think that's also why we really want to help some of these people by giving some really good tips on, well, think about, like Adam just mentioned, think about getting your hands on financial data and how we can put that into the equation.
That's crucial. You need to break down the walls in the business to do that.
Yeah.
And to get the involvement of your financial
team.
I
think that's why it's so important to have C-suite buy-in, because sometimes this is really difficult and it's politically delicate because it's about putting your value on your customers, and you really need somebody senior to champion that because that's scary to do when you're
really is. But I think there are some simple ways into this, and I think the key is to really talk about churn. I mean, one of the scary things we got from the Net Promoter Benchmarks survey was that 40% of companies just don't know their churn rate.
No.
So the key thing is to try and calculate that as best as possible. And I put an example in here, a really simple one, and this is pretty normal actually, 70 to 80% of retaining customers a year. But in $1 billion business, that's a 250 million loss.
Yeah.
And so I put it here, is that's how you can get onto the agenda, because you can be the man or woman who's the person that can stop that loss.
And you might not even set yourself the target of closing the entire gap, but even if you take 5% out of that pie, then you can already start. And I think that is one of the things that is sort of like actually a really easy step to take, is to talk more about numbers. Yep. So already put that into the conversations that you're having. So don't talk about things that are on the softer side and on the softer metric, not because they're not valid. They really are. It just takes a much more courageous CEO to buy into it and then to support it. Whereas, if you have sort of like because everybody at the end of the day, also CEOs and C-suite people, they're normal people, and they are really just sort of like dealing with what they know, what they feel comfortable with. And mostly they got to that seat because they were good at numbers and they were good at growing a business. So if you can actually see that that's their point of reference and understand that that's what makes them sort of get it, then that would be your quickest way in, is my personal finding.
I also love this. I mean, this is one of the takeaways I had when talking to a CEO from Black Duck. And they were saying that they'd measured their retention, and they'd gone from 80% to 92% retention in a year. Yeah. That was literally putting millions to the bottom line.
Yeah.
It became that important to them as a business. Yeah. And so that is now one of the ways that going forward.
But I think also in that particular example, you were talking to people in the C-suite who were only net new business focused and not really retention focused. But when we could see that how much value that represented, it almost felt like, you could see the, how do you call it, the things falling off the eyes.
Scales falling off the eyes.
Because it's like this kind of, oh my God, we're just letting this money float away. And it's like sort of almost getting everything tightened up from the basic steps up.
True enough. So you've got on the agenda. Now the next thing is to start presenting things in a really simple way. I put an illustration from CustomerGauge here, but people could equally do their own. So you bring in your churn numbers, part of the big picture.
If you can get your hands on them, or make some good assumptions.
That's absolutely right. And then start putting your NPS and revenue stats to work. Put in some big buckets there, make some assumptions based on the Net Promoter Scale of what business is safe, as we have here, and what is at risk. And there could be a whole chunk in the middle that you don't know about. Call it out, I say.
Well, at least in this particular reporting incident, what could be great is if you don't have the financial numbers, is to at least make visible how big the buckets are. So how many companies. So if you don't, so as a first step, because I know how hard this can be, and then maybe a step before this sort of like, churn numbers could be get then from that a dedicated person who can help you actually calculate this. So if you can say, well, 100 out of our 300 customer base customers are at risk, that's a chunk. And then you want to get somebody to say, let's quantify that.
Yeah, I really agree. Okay, so and then I'm going to go into, if I were in that seat, I would try and show just a few stats. And so I put this together because I think this is how I've done this before. I like to show a really simple Net Promoter Score chart with a couple of segments here, a couple of key segments of the business. So here's how this part of the business is performing. It might be one division and another one, or top customers and bottom customers. Keep it really simple and showing a trend. And for maximum bonus points, add a target in here, because then you know where you're getting to. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, now so you might argue with me on this, Camilla, but I think this response thing is also really crucial.
No, I don't argue. I think it's crucial too because it shows engagement.
Right.
It actually is already written on the slide, so you don't need me here. You can just write.
So I like to talk about coverage, which is reach times response, and we talk a lot about response in our business, about the response rate. But if you're not surveying all of your customers, your coverage is much lower. And this can be a gotcha. If you go into the board meeting and somebody will ask you this difficult question, yes, but how many customers are you talking to? Then you've got to be able to back that up. So this is a CRM issue, and I'll talk about this later in how you ask for help.
I think actually it's normally okay. It's an older discussion, and I think we're getting away from that. Even if looking at ourselves, we've actually changed our whole pricing, not to talk about sort of volumes, but talk about number of contacts.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and we actually changed that because we thought our pricing was in that sense counterproductive, because it was stopping people from sending out to everybody, because they thought, sending out to everybody is expensive, so let's not, which is like not what you want to get as an effect. So we actually encourage, and I think now more and more people are buying into the fact that this should just be an automated flow, and you shouldn't be selecting, because if you select and take a chunk, you actually also partly are skewing your own results.
You're absolutely right on this. On the right-hand side here, I'm talking about firefighting. Issues closed on time. And we know, I'm thinking of Nilfisk as a great example of actually really going to the board and getting support to close issues on time. Do you remember some of the things that they were doing there? They set a time to close the issues, and that required a huge culture change in the organization.
It did.
Right from the top. So I think these three things are really good. If you own the CX program, you don't actually own these issues, but you have to go to the board and the C-suite to make a difference in everything.
I think actually everybody has then these targets, and they're shared, and it's sort of like you can then, as a CX person or a Net Promoter person, own them and present them back.
Okay, so here now I'd like your comments on this, but these are what I sort of call when you keep it simple, keep the science simple, the do's that I think are essential to do here. So we said about simple trends over time. I really believe in doing surveys continuously. I think a once a year survey routine that's a very old-fashioned way of doing it.
It's actually it's more sort of like a research way of approach. So you do it once, you analyze, and then you think, now we know it. But it doesn't do the thing which we believe, or I believe you should be doing, which is keeping a close tab continuously.
Exactly.
So you would never know issues that arise throughout the year. And in a way, it's almost sort of like a little bit frightening when companies try and just still stay with that. Although some of our customers have a very good reason. They're very seasonal,
Yes.
or their buying cycles are very different. But then you're talking either sort of like very bespoke B2B industry, or, you know, very seasonal, as in somebody who just sells Christmas trees, you know, okay, fair enough.
That's a good market.
But other than that, and then you would still, in that market time, when you actually are selling, you would still want to do continuous, even though then maybe it would be a shorter period of time. I think continuous is really like, in my world, it's like not, in my world, it's not up for debate.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and also it's the only way you can really link, you know, how you can grow from it. If you have this, you're looking at this, you know, minimum quarterly, I think is the way to do this.
Yeah.
I'm also talking here about breaking out key segments. We cover that. I think it's nice to have comparisons with other companies. I don't think it's essential. I think it can take you down the wrong route, but it's a nice comfort zone for many things. Targets we spoke about. Now here's the other thing. Now you were talking about involving the finance people. So how would that help?
I think at the end of the day, what you really would, and so I'm trying to be careful here because I don't want to scare everybody off by sort of, but the end goal is that you understand at some stage in time what 1 point in Net Promoter equals in euros or dollars or pounds or whichever currency that you buy by. And that's why you need somebody who has a handle on the numbers, because you want to link it to purchase cycle. So some companies have 3-year renewal rates. Some countries have, some companies have it by year, and you need somebody to know that beyond it and own that bit, so that you can get almost like a neutral calculation of the value. By the time that you know what 1 Net Promoter equals in value, you can actually, I think, ask for almost anything.
I think you're right. I think that's why we get such a great asset having Boreana on our team now. Comes with a finance background, really able to help.
Yeah, we're actually doing this ourselves. So we've made the head of our CSM team is a finance professional with a very seasoned track record, and it's a miracle she wanted to do it. But there we are. We're going to show these.
Most exciting part of business, Camilla.
We're going to show the companies that we act, and we're going to also help them sort of like how we build our points out.
I like to show a few drivers of churn, and if I can, when I do this, I always try and get 3 stats out of this. So I always want to have the net, you know, this is the impact on Net Promoter, this is the number of customers that it affects, and also it's costing us this many dollars.
Yeah.
And then for sheer power, and I remember this back from our Sony and Philips days, talking about actually illustrating it with some real customer comments. That there seems to be nothing more powerful than that to the board, actually. This is what customers say. So
I remember also at some stage at Vodafone, and they had some really, really challenging comments, and they presented them to the board, and I think the board people got a heart attack.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
and it literally completely derailed everything, and everybody suddenly was on this kind of like, what is going on? And
that's a good hint for people. So carefully choose the comments, because they can derail things.
Or at least make sure that you explain them very well up front, and then make them go into the inbox weekly. But I think actually one of the things that you can make somebody read their comments is their reports on Net Promoter is because you spice it up with the comments. The comments are always like, you know, the gold dust.
I really agree.
And actually, I think it's really interesting because we're now doing this in the medical industry as well. And you're thinking doctors reading feedback on their performance. But I've heard examples, and that's why we had to optimize it for the mobile phones, because they love in their sort of coffee breaks to just read through these comments. Comments are really what excites everybody.
But if you have, it's really important to prepare people for possible negative comments. I mean, that's one of the things when we see that, but you know, hopefully you're further along than that.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring this in, and this is B2B specific, and this is really your speciality here. So I pulled a few things out. Can you just give a little bit of a color about why QBRs, or quarterly business reviews, are so important for key customers?
Well, we think it's just a really great way to have a structured engagement. So we plan them, and we sort of like agree on a time, and we then pre the meeting send out our own CustomerGauge Net Promoter surveys, and we ask them how they would rate us. And what it does is it gives us, first and foremost, feedback on issues that we are maybe not aware of. And we measure this continuously, so we know how our Net Promoter score is going up or down, or, you know, how we're performing, basically. What it also allows us to do, it allows us to give them something back, because basically we get bought normally by people who are slightly higher up in the organization, but we survey the people who are underneath it, who use the tool.
People. Yeah.
And what we can show them then is sort of like a very transparent representation of their investment. So we're saying this is what you think, but this is what people that use the system at different layers think of your investment with us.
Yeah.
And we've identified basically 3 layers, sort of like the top line, middle management, and the sort of like, we call them operational users. And then we've also got people who've not been categorized into any of these 3 buckets, but that's not good because you should have them assigned to a certain level. And we assign, we send out this survey, and from there we build our quarterly business review with our customers, because it gives us an understanding of how is it going, and what are we not getting right, or what are we doing phenomenally well. And we use CustomerGauge for that, like you can see on this slide. And we literally also track the response rate in the different levels in the organization with the comments. And ideally, before the QBR, we do follow up, and we try and already sort of like address if there is anything burning.
I love this approach. There's a couple of things. First of all, you can cover a large amount of your revenue. I mean, it's a real 80-20 rule here. 20% of the customers represent about 80% of the revenue, so you don't have to cover everybody.
Yeah.
I like it. I can track this in Salesforce, and I can see how many QBRs we're doing and we're missing, and we've really improved a lot on that. And I think that's been a great indicator for both of us, that we know that we're missing traction if our clients are less willing to engage in a QBR or that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's not perfect. Some companies don't, but I think the majority does. They love it. And actually, we've even had some really great QBRs recently where our customers said, this is fantastic. We're going to do something similar with our customers. So it's almost like a really good way, because I think everybody always struggles to give relevant content in such meetings.
Now, what is the link with this to the C-suite and the board? You found, I think, most successfully getting senior people on really helps.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little
actually,
bit about
that? It's actually when we sort of explain what we're doing, that we're sort of like giving them a sort of like a transparent view back into how the investment with us is working out, but that we're also, it's a really challenging meeting. So we are trying to score our customers and let themselves score based on our findings of best practice. So it's very much kind of like a consultative meeting as well. We're trying to sort of challenge our customers, and in that, I think they see an opportunity to invite their C people.
I agree, but I think also for the board, because it's much better when you get a senior executive on from our company to do that.
Yeah.
So I think this is.
So I sit in on these as well as a sort of like
I do too occasionally. So
you do?
Yeah. All right, moving on. So here's some don'ts I put together, and again, see if you agree or disagree with these. But you said this already. Think your audience are non-experts, and they might pretend that they are, because board people generally have a great big ego that they don't want to.
Well, I think they can be very nice. So, let's not make them all bad. But I do think they have very sort of packed agendas, very short attention spans, because they've always got something pressing in their head. You might be lucky and have somebody who's totally zen and sort of like meditates throughout the day. But most people are highly strung and pressured. So you've got to get to the point very, very quickly. And so what you don't want to do is waste time on explaining the logic, having different, complex analyses which take like almost like a PhD to explain, because I think A, bores people, or B, it makes people suspicious.
I agree.
And it's like, because effectively, how your customers are performing should be an easy measurement.
Worst examples I've seen, just a couple, correlation of 2 scales. I mean, that really sends people to sleep. Talking about error bars, I mean, this is really stuff that's best left for the coffee break, isn't there, or deep dive. Also, I saw some people once do a net promoter score on an email that they were sending out.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
And they basically got 7 results, and we're trying to make some discussions from it. Listen, I'm not here to talk about whether NPS is better or not. It doesn't matter what scale you use, but do not then get into a discussion about whether this is the best or the different. So just say it's an industry standard way of measuring.
I think that's the killer thing about Net Promoter. It is an industry standard, and I think it's actually almost a shame that people are trying to attack it so much.
Not too many charts, another one. Again, just keep it simple.
And
I've seen some stuff from friends of mine who show me 20 charts that they get every week, showing their net promoter scores. It's just unreadable. Okay, coming to the end of here's what I think are some next steps. I mean, we've been in board meetings, right? You need to also get some concrete things to nail it down.
Yeah.
And I think that if we take the what we know about this, you need a good champion on the board who can drive this. And here's why: because you need to get the program endorsed. You need to get help from marketing to help you do referrals. Different departments like customer support to do the firefighting, sales that help with the CRM, like actually getting the things in there.
Yeah.
IT, I mean, it's really good if you get the data integrated. And finally, you're making the point about finance, about getting these guys on board.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I think you've got to, you can start somewhere. So you don't have to have everything in place. I would actually almost say, start somewhere. So pick a champion, pick a buddy, and, start your battle from there and work your way through.
And the final point, which we were talking about the QBRs, if you can get board members or your CXOs to actually get on a call with the customer, and actually I believe that's something that really should be in their job description, that they need to call a customer once a month or something like that, and really challenge them on this. I believe that senior managers and senior executives really want to do that, but they forget about it. You just have to remind them about that, and if you can come up with a program that brings them in, it's got to be a winner.
I'm not sure everybody really wants to do it, but I think it's hilarious if you do. So I would definitely suggest you do it, just to get them calling their customers. I think it's a phenomenally powerful thing.
Okay, I'm going to say that you've done your job if the CXO, the CEO, or someone actually talks about this. And I track when board members or people talk about it in their earnings results. So here's one. I just picked a few this morning. I got one from AT&T and Vodafone and a few others. But I picked this one out because I really liked it, because in the earnings transcripts, in the earnings call that they have with companies, this is $1 billion American organization, they speak about Net Promoter Score. And he actually says we reduce the attrition of revenue from existing clients by approximately 20%.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Exactly. And somebody has correctly articulated the program to the CEO, and the CEO has remembered that, or he's reading it off something, but he's got that as a soundbite. Yeah. And if you are the program manager for CX in that company, you should really give yourself a pat on the back. So congratulations, whoever's doing it at Volt. Well done. That's brilliant. I think that's it, really. That's sort of everything I've got to talk about on there. And we can take some Q&A now.
Yeah.
Trish, have we got any questions? Final question, I would say here. Can you give us give us one example of how you've seen the board really helping somebody in their CX program?
Well, I think your earlier example of Black Duck was phenomenal, but I have a really good example also with Aegon, where they have actually, we came in 3 years ago, and they had a program that was really sort of almost dying. It was almost being sort of, how do you call that, costed out. And we brought, I think, sort of like we saw a refreshment of it, because I said, you've got to set yourself some targets. I think that was the first thing that took a bit of courage, but that changed it, because suddenly you had this group of people that said, we're going to measure ourselves on this. And from there, they've improved so much, and suddenly everybody likes talking about it because it's a success. But also they've been really clever at celebrating their successes and involving larger parts of the organization. So you've got a huge adoption rate there, and the CEO talking to the relevant people. So I think there are so many. I can't, because I feel bad if I pick one, I don't pick any of the others. So yeah.
I think that there are some great examples out there. Just to sort of summarize them, I think that board members and CEOs are often a bit jaded about CX programs. And that's actually why we wanted to talk about this today, because we can have a great CX day and talk about these things, but what does it mean to the board?
Yeah.
And too many programs don't talk about the financial end result.
Yeah.
They're not able to show the return on investment of the program.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing. If you're able to show that to your CEO and your board members, they will really go into battle for you and really do to protect you. And if you can't do that, you need to find the resources or find another job, probably.
Well, let's end on a high. Let's end on a high here. Yeah, are we getting a sign that we're talking too much? We always do. So yes, we're going to send out a copy of this. I believe we've recorded this showing, and I think also we've got other pieces of content that we will be sharing with you going forward. I think actually the most important thing that I would like everybody to take away is that it's actually okay to involve your board. They are not that terrifying, but you've just got to get the message right. And maybe that's where we would be super happy to help you. Yeah. If you just wanted to soundboard it off somebody, and maybe that's just a really good thing to take away from it. I offer to look at, anything that you put out there. If you just want a bit of advice on what could be a good presentation or what not, or good report or what not, we're here to help.
I agree. And if anyone's listening to this, I couldn't promote Camilla anymore. She's definitely the right person to get on that call. She bears the scars of many board meetings to show. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and attending. We'll record it and send out the presentation. Until next time.
Bye-bye.